Yes, 10% will be affected dramatically by AI.
What we actually have is AI being able to create softwares, to create apps, to create anything you want.
That species that changes the quickest will be the one that survive.
In the 19th century, people were scared that people were going to lose their
Very
jobs.
good point.
Some people did lose their job, but then
Yes.
other jobs were created.
It will be a tsunami, and tsunamis are very scary because who wants to look at a 20-meter high wall at the ocean?
We should be focusing on how to use AI in our favor.
Good morning, everybody. This is Peter Merle, executive producer of Sci-Tech Suisse and Lifestyle, here today with Margarita Silva, our
Hello.
producer and anchor. As we promised you a couple of weeks ago, we had decided to create a new concept within the Sci-Tech Suisse family, which we call Vibe Check. What is Vibe Check? Is a podcast where the executive producer and the producer are talking about issues that are fresh, maybe controversial, definitely of interest to you, that affect you either in your life, that affect your job, and what have you. So we decided with the new season to introduce this new concept, Vibe Check. And the first topic we chose is, I think, a very relevant one, which is, and we call it the tsunami in the labor market caused by AI. Sounds very dramatic, but you will see that we have good foundation for this discussion. Labor market is very important. It has to do with demographics, particularly here in Europe and in Japan. We're talking about we're getting too old. The boomers are going in retirement. The millennials, the Generation Z is taking over. There will be more boomers than Generation Z. So that has a huge implication. So we thought it's very relevant and it's very fresh because a think tank here in Switzerland called Avenir Suisse, privately funded by all the big corporations and consulting firms, came up with a very interesting series of information on that we wanted to share with you. And quite frankly, Margarita and I will discuss if that's okay. So, with much not ado, let's just go straight into the discussion that Avenir Suisse was having, and we're sharing right now with you a chart to this regard, which is called the exposure score. Okay, so when we're talking about AI and who is helped by AI, who profits from AI, and whose jobs are threatened by AI, you see here in front of you a beautiful chart which has certain quadrants. Okay, and let's start with the very right one, which is called the stars that will profit the most from AI. Those are people in leading positions, so the CEOs, the people that run companies, be that large companies, large corporations, lawyers, and business leaders will profit from AI, right? Sort of intuitively makes sense. On the left side, which is sort of the quadrant where people are supported by AI, will definitely profit from it, but will be supported by it. Those are particular doctors, dentists, engineers, and legal support, which also intuitively makes sense. Then we have the ones that in the left corner, which Boston Consulting calls the dog corner, so to speak, because it's really not affected by what's going on. Those are professions that have to do with craftsmanship, and craftsmanship in all levels. That can be the carpenter, the mason, the auxiliary helper, all the way to any kind of client interfacing job. That's very important to differentiate that. So office jobs where people are client facing, salespeople, business developers, client relationship managers will be less affected by AI in this study. And people with low income jobs as well, the cleaning lady and whatnot, they will be less affected by what AI is doing for them. And then let's go in the very right corner. This is the threat corner, really. Those are the jobs that are really affected by AI, and those are the classical office jobs, not client related, bookkeeping, receptionists, and what have you. The study says, with regards to Switzerland, and similar logic applies to others, about 500 jobs will be affected by AI. If you look at the Swiss market that we happen to know pretty well, Margarita and I, we have about 5 million people working. So about 10% of the workforce are will be threatened by AI. So altogether, an interesting statistic. Margarita, what is your take on that chart?
Yes, so the first thing I want to say is that, and starting with a bit of humor, there is a meme that says, I would like AI and robots to be doing my dishes and cleaning my house so I can focus on painting, on writing, on the creative side of it, and not the other way around, which pretty much summarizes the whole drama, because we used to think that at this stage, we would have, these robots and these fancy machines around the house doing a lot of stuff for us. But instead, what we have right now, it's a very advanced AI that doesn't even have a body, but it's super, super advanced, and it's advancing every single day to do more and more fancy stuff, right? Like not just doing the dishes or cutting the grass or this kind of stuff, but what we actually have is AI being able to create softwares, to create apps, to create anything you want. Because like even a script, you just ask them to write a script, a movie script. I want 120 pages.
Right.
They will do it in
So basically, what you are telling us is that the findings of that study is basically that 90% will either profit, are not affected at all, or will be supported by AI. I mean, realizing that, yes, 10% of the workforce is not small. I mean, 500,000 people that day to day go in the office, do their stuff. They're not interfacing clients. Interesting enough, also, MBAs are affected by that too. I think they still think that MBAs are only doing PowerPoint presentations, that thereby you can replace them. I'm sure any kind of MBA, including myself, would take issue, because if you go into the consulting firms or into the strategic departments of corporations, those MBAs would say, what the heck? I mean, AI is helping me. But it was very interesting how Avenir Suisse put that. But
yes.
I think that's an interesting finding for me, that yes, 10% will be affected dramatically by AI, but 90% either not at all. Like, masons that have to put bricks together and whatnot. AI can only help so much in the measurement, but the actual, building a house, constructing a furniture, doing a floor, doing a roof and whatnot, the AI is rather limited, unless we invent robots that can do all that. But now we're talking probably 3-4 generations down there. So altogether, it is a tsunami for those 10%, I would say. But I'm not totally depressed. One thing I also would like to mention, since I'm a boomer, about 30 years ago, a gentleman by the name of Bill Gates invented the Microsoft Office. And the Microsoft Office invented Excel, Word document, and other, and email and what have you. So I did go through a transition where before Microsoft, I had an assistant in New York that did retype my memos. I had to type a memo. I sometimes dictated a memo. She was in charge of all kind of office management things that nowadays you guys would laugh at. So, and when Microsoft came up with where I could write my own PowerPoint presentation, where I could write my own document, where authors didn't have to use the pencil anymore, but now could use the computer to do that. People were saying, oh, it's the end of newspapers, it's the end of books, it's the end of secretaries and what have you, and the internet will take over everything. And
actually, what I was going to say is that it's definitely one of the main things. Like, we tend to, every time we have this kind of big changes, we tend to be very scared, obviously, because change is scary by definition for humans.
We don't want to change.
Exactly. We are against it and we resist, and that is the human nature.
Yes.
But then in the end, it's not black or white, right? Like when we had like when we started doing machines in industries, in the 19th century, people were scared that people were going to lose their
Very
jobs.
good
They
point.
did. It's a
Yes.
reality. Some people did lose their job, but then
Yes.
other jobs were created, right? Which is also
Yes.
the case right now. With the AI, there are many new roles that we are seeing that are being created. For example, there is a role that it's prompt creator, which means it's someone specialized on created prompts that will take you to have the desired result with AI.
Yeah.
And like you would say like, oh, it's funny that there will be someone specifically doing that, like pretty much learning how to talk to AI, pretty much,
Yes.
right? But it's going to be a new role, and there are some companies already in Switzerland looking for this kind of role, right?
Yes.
So
Which is an interesting point, because statistically, about 30% of the investment budget of Swiss corporations, and the same thing is probably true in the rest of Europe and the world, goes into IT, where you are increasing the efficiency, increasing the production level, and replacing repetitive things in the car industry, when Henry Ford in the 1920s invented the conveyor belt, and then about 60 years later, the Swedes said, this is kind of boring. I mean, you have workers doing the same thing all day and out. They came up with a different concept whereby they do it in a group level, and what have you. So I think in general, Darwin is right. We don't like to change. That species that changes the quickest will be the one that survive. Some
exactly.
journalists called it the survival of the fittest. He never said that, but it's the velocity of change, and I think we're one of those phases. So I think altogether, yes, it will be a tsunami, and tsunamis are very scary, because who wants to look at a 20-meter high wall at the ocean? But let me continue with Avenir Suisse, because they dug a little deeper when it came to genders, to Swiss and non-Swiss citizens, salaries, and what have you. So let's share with our audience the second chart we have, which I think is very intriguing. Again, you see those four boxes of the group that will profit from it, that has advantages, will be seriously threatened by it in the exposure score, and the ones that are not affected at all by it. They looked at men and women, and very interesting. The ones that will profit, 23%, 21% women, sort of intuitively makes sense. The one that will be supported by AI, interesting enough, almost 30% men, 20% women. The only reason I could see for that is that in that bucket are a lot of doctors, lawyers, and what have you, that not enough women go to university yet, and therefore more men will profit from that than women. The one that are threatened is 24% of the men and 27% of the women. Traditionally, women are working in non-client interfacing office jobs, and therefore that might be higher than that. But 24% men is not small either. So those are the male receptionists in the New York Towers, or at the banks, and what have you. And the ones that are not affected at all, interesting enough, 32% of the women not affected by it, and 25% of the men. What are your observations, Margarita? Just listening at this statistic, just from my intuitive. What are your thoughts?
Well, the first thing I can definitely associate is because we saw already that CEOs are going to benefit from it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's also very clear that CEOs are in majority male more than women. This is a
Yes.
reality. I mean, women are getting more and more there, but it's a reality that it's mostly men. So that it
Very
would
good point.
be one thing that would definitely affect the statistic, because obviously women tend to be in more, because I feel the whole sense of it is like the most affected in reality are going to be those who are right in the middle, not the ones
Yes.
who are in charge, not the ones who are doing the jobs that are more like handcraft and anything with the hands, but the people who, as you said, are in the office doing maybe tasks that are repetitive, etc. And obviously that's where we also find a lot of women, and this is something that traditionally we tend to associate the assistant, the secretary, the receptionist,
Yeah.
all female,
Non, non,
right?
non-client interface. I mean, receptions, of course, do interface, but clearly one could imagine that a QR code
Exactly.
will
And then
replace
AI,
receptions.
it's taking over on many of those tasks. So what
Yes,
is my thought on that? It's on the one side, we can say, yes, maybe some women will be losing their jobs. But I also see an opportunity there, because what it will mean is that maybe women will just start applying for other types of jobs, or maybe more CEO roles, right? So
yes.
as I said, it's always that relativity. It's like, okay, we're gonna lose something, but then what else can we gain from this? Because the whole idea with AI right now is like, we should be focusing on how to use AI in our favor. So it means if AI is doing the repetitive tasks, the boring tasks, the ones that tend to be more systematic, it means, okay, maybe I can focus on more creative tasks, or maybe I can focus more on the, as you said, on the customer service, or facing the client, etc., instead of doing a database, for example. Instead of doing the database, I can just focus on approaching the client, because the AI will be doing the database, right? So
That's a very good point, and it leads into the second observation, which and now we share that chart of that, which is the education. Okay, so what kind of education level will be more affected, positively, negatively by AI than others? And as you can see here, they broke it down into elementary school, which is 6 years of basic schooling, secondary school, which is 3 more years without high school diploma. Then they broke it down into higher education, which is high school education with applied science, and then the ones that go to university. And that really is a tsunami chart right here, because as you can see, starting with the university degree, 50% of the ones who have a university degree will profit from AI. 19% who are looking for higher education will profit from it. So this is a clear indication that we as a society and parents should make sure that our kids have education way above the required 6 years and the secondary school, and go for that. Now, I might sound like an elitist, but just on what group will profit from it, that is very good news. Okay. However, that doesn't mean every one of our kids has to go to university and has to get a high education, because on the other side, as we can see, the ones that are not affected at all by AI are the ones with elementary school. 59%, so almost 60%, that go just to 6 years of basic schooling will not be affected. Well, those are the auxiliary workers, those are facility management teams, those are people that have very small education, but they're not affected because we need them physically to do the shopping for the elderly, to work in the hospitals and what have you. So don't worry, your Johnny and Susie don't have to go to university. If they do, they belong to the 50% that will profit from AI. But if Johnny and Susie just do elementary school, the Avenir Suisse found out 60% will not be affected by AI. So these I found a interesting observation. How do you see it, Marita?
in terms of education, I think it's too early, because right now, actually, the main thing in education sector is how do we work with AI, instead of telling students, don't use AI, or you're going to become dumb if you use AI for doing your work. Right now, the main challenge that universities and high school and education in general has is how to integrate the AI use in the educational system. And what that means is that if students grow up right now, the kids that are now in high school, etc., learn how to use AI in a proper way. And proper, we can discuss afterwards what proper means.
Yeah.
But what I mean is, like, if I use it in my favor, just instead of becoming lazy and putting AI just to do things in a very mediocre way. But if I use it in a very productive way, that can actually potentialize the abilities of people. So what that means is that this statistic is based on what's happening right now, which is
Yes.
not necessarily what will happen in 5 or 10 years when we have actually incorporated the use of AI in schools and in universities. And that means, and the general message is that the more we learn how to use AI in our favor, the least threatened we will be.
Yes, absolutely. I think to embrace the change and be with the change again, that's your message like from before, creativity, flexibility, really, right? That is the key to survive that.
Exactly.
Um, I found it very interesting that the push for universities, and I just came from one of the open days at the University of Zurich and ETH here, and see those 18, 19-year-old ones with their big eyes, looking to what subject they should study and whatnot. I was impressed by one stand, which was called the eclectic degree. And so I went there and I said, what does that mean? I said, well, if you want to study psychology, you have to study psychology. If you want to study architecture, you have to study architecture. And then for the next 6 years, you're in a track. Many young people, they said to me, they want to have a little bit psychology, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and sort of have a potpourri, as the French say, un mezclado of different studies that also have a bachelor and a master's degree, creating more flexibility. And I think this is interesting that the universities already recognize that just offering one subject is, for some sort of students, not as of much interest as of others. Clearly, when I grew up, I knew that I want to become a lawyer and I want to go to business school. Fine. Well, some people don't. And I think that's interesting that the university is really adapting to these kind of changes. The second observation I have is that there's incredible pressure on our young people, the 10, 11-year-old ones, to have to go to high school and get their high school education. Otherwise, they don't have a job, whatnot. Well, looking at the statistic, not necessarily. I mean, the secondary school where you get education afterwards in a certain trade, so to speak, are can profit from it, can are supported by it. So not necessarily, but as you said, you have to be very smart what you choose. If you just choose the job that can be replaced by a QR code, that can't be replaced by a robot down the street, that can be replaced by ChatGPT, if you will. That's sort of the common denominator that people hear about. There will be changes. The third, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marita.
No, I was just gonna say because you mentioned something very important. It's like the ability to adapt to all these changes will
Yeah.
be, the key in all of this. Because we had for example, and a very clear example of this is photography. We had the photography that was being revealed physically, and we had labs that were, doing the whole process of the photograph. And then when the digital image came, that was, a whole revolution. And then the photographers who survived were the ones who adapted to this and who learned to use the digital cameras and who learned to use Photoshop and who learned to, adapt to all these changes, right? So it's exactly the same right now. And actually, for photography, it's also a big challenge right now because it's a big discussion
Huge.
that it's
Huge.
been taken. It's that how to recognize real images from AI images. Sometimes it gets really tricky. And there are some people actually becoming professionals on how to tell the difference between one thing and the other. So there's an opportunity there, but there's also an opportunity for every photographer to learn how to use AI in their favor to edit the pictures, that instead of taking 1 hour editing one picture, maybe
Yes.
now it will take you 5 minutes, right? And maybe that will give you more time to do more pictures or to do different stuff. So
Yeah, that's an interesting topic because my son is advertising photographer in Austria, and he's running the AI side of the company. And of course, there's two souls. AI is very computer driven, so you can create pictures of people, surroundings, everything artificially with AI. As opposed to photography, where, as you said, you have to have the lens, you have to have the lighting and the timing and whatnot. And he's in this dilemma right now if he should go the AI route and become a computer specialist as opposed to the creative one. And I told him one doesn't exclude the others, quite frankly. If you do AI as sort of your day job, I still believe there will be space for people that want to look for man-made pictures because of their sensitivity and their emotions, the emotional intelligence behind it will be very important, all the way to art, right? Where certain pictures will be looked at and traded, just like we didn't give up reading books when Amazon came up with Kindle. Everybody thought, well, print is over and we have that. So as you said before, it's not black, it's not white, it is gray, but it requires change. And because of technology, faster change than before. So the velocity of change did increase, but here we are. I think I look at it positively. I agree. The third topic that we want to cover is, and based on the Avenir Swiss findings, has to do with, in the case of Switzerland, is there a difference between if you're Swiss, if you're a foreigner having lived here up to 7 years, are you a foreigner having lived here 8 years and more? We picked this because it's a bit controversial all over Europe. The theme of migration, remigration, and what have you are highly politically sensitive, and not just in Europe but also in Switzerland. So we thought that's an interesting statistic, and it's interesting in two ways to look at that. So first of all, the ones that profit from it will be 23% of the Swiss. The foreigners that have lived here up to 7 years are even higher than that. I would say those are the typical doctors, MBAs, business leaders, CEOs, C-level that the big corporations get in from abroad that will profit from that. And only 15% of the foreigners that have lived here for 8 and more years will profit from that. So there's a certain dissection in this regard. If I look at the threatened position, interesting, the Swisses will be more affected by it. 27% of the Swisses will be affected by AI. Only 22% of the foreigners that live here for up to 7 years. I would think because they leave after 7 years. And then very interesting, foreigners that lived here for 8 and more years will be affected less than the Swisses. Interesting observation, just right off the bat, since both of us are not Swiss. What is your observation as a non-Swiss person, Margarita?
I found it really, really confronting to find these statistics. So I wouldn't be sure what are the reasons why the non-Swiss that have been here less than 7 years are actually not that affected and can even profit from that.
Yes.
And yes, it's something really food for thought, because it just the thing with this with AI is just like it's changing so much that we don't, and sometimes we cannot even understand the impact, how it's impacting every single person in a different way. And sometimes we think it's gonna have one kind of impact on someone, and then it's something different. So if I might be honest, I have no clue why this statistic works like that.
Well, I'll share one observation. Foreigners that come to another country, doesn't have to be Switzerland, that are on the move from wherever, Colombia to Switzerland, from Austria to New York and coming back here, are nimble, because we had to learn very early to adapt, right? When I was in New York and had to hustle for a green card, I had to be faster than anybody else, right? An American didn't have to hustle because they had an American passport and could work. So one of the reasons could be that foreigners that come here are already much more adapted to change and can adapt quicker than the locals. There's nothing to do with the Swisses. It could be Austrian, could be German. If you live in your country your whole life, you sort of live in those tracks that you're used to, that your father did this, your mother did this, and your grandfather did this. So change for you doesn't come as easily. Where I could see that the foreigners that lived here for more than 8 years were much nimbler, had to change more often, maybe lived in various countries before they came here. So that's why they adapt quicker. And that also why they profit. So the ones that are up to 7 years here, meaning somebody who comes from Argentina, comes from Colombia, comes from New York, comes from Boston, from Harvard and whatnot, can adapt AI much quicker in his or her job and therefore even faster than the Swisses. So I think it has to do, again, the red thread in our conversation is velocity of change, flexibility, and adapting to change. That's my observation.
Actually, that makes a lot of sense when you put it that way, because also the Swiss people culturally, they are well known to be very squared and very,
Conservative. Yeah.
it's like they really like rules and they really like things very structured, which
Yeah.
means maybe some people, like for example, Latin people, we are experts in adapting to whatever happens, because living in Latin America, it's just, it's a challenge itself. You go out and you never know what's going to happen. You go back at night and you say like, okay, that was quite the day, right? So for us, it's something that it's in our blood already, in our DNA. But I would also say that something that might play a part, now that you mentioned this, is that people who come from abroad, we tend to be more used to work on multicultural environments, right?
And adapt quicker, right? And be flexible, right?
Exactly, and understand different cultures, or even, speak different languages, etc. And that also might play a part, because, these roles that are not being threatened tend to be the ones that are with customer service or sales or this kind of stuff, which I'm guessing many migrants actually might be doing here in Switzerland. So
absolutely. And you probably have them from both corners, because you can see of the last touched one, 42% of the foreigners who lived here for more than 8 years, they come from all kind of educational backgrounds. Those could be ones that just have 6 years of schooling, or they could be they have university degree, PhD, and what have you, like the inventor of the corona vaccine in Germany with Turkish background, living in Germany. So I think the notion of non-local people, I don't want to limit it to the Swisses. I mean, the United States was built by immigrants, right? Even though Trump wants to close the borders to Mexico and wants to limit this, Germany's talking about the borders closed for people from Afghanistan and from Syria, redoing the whole asylum thing. It's a highly sensitive political issue. Looking at these statistics, if they are really valid, and I have to assume Avenir Suisse, it's a very reputable think tank here in Switzerland, this is interesting food for thought. And maybe we leave you with that in our podcast, which I think was an interesting journey through the tsunami in the labor market in Switzerland, with aspects on a global scale. And I had fun discussing this with you, Margarita.
Yes, it was very nice. It's a very interesting topic that we will definitely be discussing many more times.
More to come. More to come. Absolutely. We touched on the ethics in AI. We touched on the threat versus support. So absolutely great. I would like to thank you very much, and do comment, do subscribe, and we'd like to hear from you. And hopefully you join our 800,000 viewers on YouTube. And on average, we have 15 to 50,000 viewers per episode. Would love to hear from you, and thank you.
Thank you, guys. And please also follow us on our social media. We're going to leave you all the links in the description, so you can also follow us on Instagram, TikTok, etc. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.